Well, hi, everybody. I'm Bill Whittle here with my friend Alfonso Rachel, and this is the Virtue Signal, where we try and talk about some of the philosophy and ideology and morality behind politics. And so today I thought we'd deal with something that is kind of under attack quite a lot these days, and to me is not just an important part of the country, it's the essential part of the country. So today let's talk about this idea of individuality. In my opinion, the United States of America was created so that individuality would have a place to live on Earth. Prior to the invention of America, you never really owned anything. If you were the subject of the king owned your farm, he owned the cattle, he owned the grass that you were growing. Priests, all of these empires, all of it have owned you and your stuff. And for the first time in history, this thing that so many people just call capitalism, as if it's just this sort of, kind of arena. Like people talk about capitalism like it's the Thunderdome, Two people enter, one person leaves. But that's not it at all. It's not even the free market. It's the idea of private property. This is mine. It belongs to me. I can share it if I wish, but no one can take it away from me. It's mine. And that applies to whether it's your skyscraper or whether it's your hoodie. It's yours. Socialism is the antithesis of individuality. That's why, despite all the labels, conservative, liberal, blah, 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 really, when you get right down to it, there are collectivists and there are individualists. And here in the home of individualism is under relentless attack in schools, pop culture, everything. We're told that we just got to share everything and share equally. And by the way, we can't even share equally anymore, because if we have equal sharing, there's going to be people who are going to be doing more with their stuff than others. So now we have to have equity. We have to have enforced, uniform equality of outcome. And I don't know. I mean, to me, every totalitarian culture has always basically said the state is more important than the person, and in some cases, like in the Soviet Union and Nazi Germany too, for that matter, they're not shy about it. They're basically saying your only immortality as a human being, because they don't believe in God or an afterlife, the only individuality you really have is to be part of the state. You may die, but the state will live forever. You should be happy about that. I don't know. I think that when everything is said and done, all of it, the whole shooting match, comes down to the individual happiness of individual people. And if you do what the founders of the Constitution did, and that is, now, it's not to say that this has maintained its strength, but if you were to build an impermeable wall of protection around an individual, then you simply cannot get mass murders, and you cannot get slavery, and you cannot get any of these miseries that have afflicted this species since we've been a species.
Bill, man, you're one of the rare few, man, and thank you, because a lot of people, you would think that capitalism would be such an easy sell. And for some reason, it's just not. And I think a lot of those who are proponents of capitalism, they pitch it wrong. Usually when I hear capitalism in a conversation and those who are proponents of capitalism, and usually the conversation is very, very brief. It's just something to the effect of, that's right, I'm a capitalist and I'm all about making money. I believe in the free market and stuff like that. And it's like, no, that doesn't define capitalism. People make money in socialism too. So that doesn't really define what it is. But when we talk about acknowledging your property, this is yours. And with that property, you have the freedom, by your own volition, by your own good heart, if we want to call it that, you can help your neighbor. Once you make it the law to do that, you remove charity. You've removed.
And now it's resentment and anger and hatred. Yeah.
Yes.
And envy.
And now people have been sold an idea that this is woke. We're paying into our personal responsibility, our social responsibility to do these things. And, that's a lot of how we've gotten these crime syndicates and stuff like that, whether it be mafia, Salvatrucha, the triads, Yakuza, because you have a government that is so oppressive that people are like, man, this is no way to live. So they end up becoming underground markets and stuff like that. They become crime signals, just trying to survive. And then, of course, it becomes a whole another big monster. But the thing is, we have to be able to let folks know that in this God-given republic, our property is recognized as our property. It's not property of the state. The industry, the state doesn't own the industry. The state doesn't own our wealth. Because if they're owning these things, well, they might as well own you too. You're just serfs. You're property of the state. And that's someplace that we're not supposed to be. We're not supposed to be that. And when you have models that do not recognize your individuality, because these people, they talk about diversity, but solidarity at the same time, and not understanding that diversity and divide share the same root. And these people are really trying to divide and conquer us to basically be food for the state. Like you said, it's like, the state's going to live on. But when you have these models that are like that are gonna force people to do these things, you have made an institution of corruption. When people are sold on this idea that capitalists are a bunch of just bourgeoisie who only care about getting their own, no, the protection of our neighbors, unless you're doing things like sub rosa and stuff like that, and you're trying to get away with making, money under the table and all that sort of stuff. And people only do that because they're trying to protect themselves from the state. In capitalism, you really don't do that. That's just not how it works. Capitalism is the thing that keeps things above board, where you're not worried about the power of the state doing you dirty. But if you've got models like socialism and communism, you have effectively made corruption the law of the land.
And taken away your ability to make yourself happy.
Yes.
I agree completely. I've heard before, I don't know this for certain fact, but I've heard that the actual term capitalism was actually invented by Karl Marx. And it's the perfect term for an enemy, for something you're trying to destroy. Because when you talk about capitalism in that sense, you always think about the monopoly guy, right? The big fat guy with two big bags and they got dollar signs on him, and he's got the top hat and the monocle, and the only person who can play the game is the guy with capital. And that was true to some degree during the industrial era, but that's not been the case for 100 years. As usual, the progressives are at least a century behind the times. Free capitalism is the system that we call it, but really we're talking about the freedom to make yourself happy. Now, I personally don't think a pair of running shoes are worth $250, but that's not up to me. Some people really do, and they think it's worth more. And the beautiful thing about individuality is, if I accept the fact that no one has the right to tell me what to do, then I have the right to tell other people what to do. If somebody wants to spend $10,000 on a pair of running shoes, as long as it's their money, it's their business.
Right.
And so I'm not talking about capitalism in a political sense. I'm not even talking about freedom in a political sense. I'm talking about the tick-by-tick minute of a human life going by, 22,000 days, something like that. I'm talking about the tick-by-tick minute of time that can never be recaptured. You don't get a receipt. You don't get to do it over again. Individuality produces a world where, in general, most of those ticks mean a happier instant of life. You are happier with if you've coveted a pair of shoes or whatever, or a house or a boat, jets, doesn't matter. If it's something you want and you achieve it through your own hard work without stealing it or taking it from somebody else, then that's your business. And if it makes you happy, that's great. It's certainly true you can lose yourself in the worship of material objects, but that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about individualism, the idea that every life is yours and unique. And this is why I have such a problem with this idea of social justice, because I don't think social justice is justice. I think it's the antithesis of justice. For example, 7 generations ago, people were held in slavery in this country, and that's a tremendous injustice. Social justice says that the descendants of the people who inflicted the oppression have to be punished to make up for the descendants of the people who suffered the oppression, but the people who are actually in the moment living the life are not either oppressors or slaves. It's a scorecard for an ephemeral quality. Actual justice means if somebody is the victim of racism or somebody is the victim of any of these other ills, murder, rape, or whatever, actual justice is doing everything within the power of life on earth, living in reality, to make restitution, to make that person as whole as possible, to bring justice on an individual basis. But social justice is the antithesis of justice. You're punishing people for things they didn't do and rewarding people for suffering that they didn't endure.
Indeed, man. Historically and morally dyslexic. If there's going to be a country, if we have to hold a country responsible and make them pay this restitution for slavery and these evils and stuff like that, and if white people today or Americans today in general are enjoying the legacy of slavery and stuff like that, well, then that would mean that Africa should be the continent of the most wealthy nations on earth. Because when it came to the superlative on slavery, that would be Africa itself, which I understand is still going on today. So,
and in much of Arabia as well, yeah,
right?
Parts of Asia.
Yes. So slavery has been around. America's not the innovator or the inventor of slavery. Slavery has been going on for a long time, and that's been going on in Mexico. That's been going on in Cuba. That's been going on in South America. Slavery long before they hit the shores of America. With black slavery. So I mean, here's this thing where we got to make sure that Black people are the biggest victims on earth. And it just makes us look like the biggest sissies on the planet, really. It's like, oh, we're the only ones who've endured slavery? Get over yourselves. It's happened to a lot of people, and pretty darn in brutal fashion, to be frank. So, but we want to go ahead and keep America in this perpetual indictment, where a person like, say for instance, is subdued by the cops, or we have like somebody like, George Floyd or anything like that. You're never supposed to pull up their records. You're never supposed to bring up their past. It has nothing to do with what happened. You're not supposed to look at these things, but these people judge America for its past all the time. That's right. It's like,
that's the frame that we talk about. You don't see what's outside the frame, and you don't see what's before and after the cut. That the ability of a television frame to slice a piece of reality and present it as all of reality is enormously powerful weapon that the left uses against truth all the time.
Yes, that's what they do. The power of the accusation, this power of selective outrage, the power of people seeing themselves as a victim and stuff like that. So, these things, and they'll use these policies when you have the white Democrat release. So when people talk about white privilege and systemic racism and white supremacy and stuff like that, yeah, there are a body of people. The Democrats are not done. That's been their whole thing ever since the Confederacy. That's where they are. And they know, they have an idea of what America should be. They don't want a republic. They want a democracy. They want to be able to vote these things that recognize our right to live, our right to pursue happiness, our right to property, our right to liberty. Democrats want to dictate what those things are. The supreme law of the land, based on the word of God, where the founders even tell you, it's like, look, man, we are pledging our lives, our sacred honor, appealing to the supreme judge of the world. That's God himself. That's who they're talking about. So they know where these rights are coming from. Democrats don't like that. They don't like it that somebody else has the power to say that these laws are fixed and certain. We want the power to be able to outvote those according to what our desires are. And they are using the race narrative because it's the most powerful victim narrative that they have. So they pound on that one, man. That's their Death Star. So they're going to keep using that just like they did in the Confederacy, and they're doing it today. So, with this, they're going to use that to make sure that America has the judgment of being this slave country, and everybody should know what it's like to be oppressed. They're going to use that to usher in their socialistic or just their collectivist model in general. But they're going to use that.
That entire argument destroys individuality. If you go to the classic historical example of which really happened, you got a white guy on a horse and you got a black man picking cotton, and the white guy hits the guy with the whip. There's a tremendous injustice there. And the person who should be punished for this is the guy on the horse, and the person who should be made whole as much as possible is the guy on the ground. But those are two individual people. Now, it may have happened systemically, but it systemically happened between individual people holding the whip and individual people being whipped. And the idea that somehow we can make all of this right by punishing a whole new set of people and rewarding a whole nother set of people is in itself destroys the individuality of the action of the actual guy holding the whip. It basically says that the whole thing is just a giant statistical kind of a scoreboard. And this statistical thing happened here, and so we have to statistically balance it out here, and it takes away completely the individuality of, well, it's the individuality of Cain and Abel, right? I mean, it's really what it comes down to when you get right down to basics. There's somebody holding the rock, and there's somebody who's not. And you cannot take that individual action away from it, because if they're right, if there is no individual choice and all of this stuff is based on, then we're just robots. And I don't believe it, and they don't believe it either. But staying on individuality for a second, let's come back just a little bit closer to the present. Leaves 170 years ago and try to come back to the present day, more or less. We are at the tail end of this COVID-19 pandemic. There's no question about that. And one of the things that we've seen during this pandemic is that and I don't want to get into the details of how deadly it is. I don't want to get into any of that. What I do want to do is I want to talk about the fact that there certainly seem to be people who, if not enjoyed wearing the masks, certainly seem to be more willing to wear them and more willing to endure the restrictions of them. And one of the things that I just realized when you were talking is that I think the people that love the masks and are just waiting for the government to give them permission. I've maintained this from the beginning. One of the reasons that these socialists love the pandemic so much is because the masks eliminate our individuality. They eliminate our facial features to a large degree. They eliminate our individual action. I'm working on a firewall called coerced cowardice, and that's really what it is. It's almost like one of those Pink Floyd animations where the kids have no mouth. You know what I mean? That's really what it is.
Yes.
You and since I'm on a roll here, apparently, it's not only erasing your individuality. It is literally, honestly, now a gag. It's a what's the word?
That fits.
I guess it's what?
That fits. It's a gag. Yeah.
Yeah. It is. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, I tell you what, man. And it's just like you were talking about. You gave the teaching on the Jews who are were made to wear that star. It's kind of like this thing too. Even people thinking that it makes them a good person. It's like I'm ready to be seen as one of those who are willing to cooperate. Let's go ahead and get to get through this, and I'm gonna do my part. These kind of motivations that they have where I'm just looking out for other people and I'm trying to be a good person and they want to be seen as woke and all that sort of stuff. So they'll even sacrifice their individuality and gag themselves, as you say, even though they claim to be proponents of the First Amendment, they basically masked off their ability to speak and they're not speaking up against these things. They're made to believe that by their actions, they're a good person. And once again, Bill, and who's leading the charge on this? This is your white Democrats. That's why I keep trying to tell folks, white supremacy is not done. It's still out there. It lives with the Democrat parties. These white people who are doing this think that they're the better white people, even better than other white people. So the white supremacy is still there. And it's strange. And you had mentioned that, that people have this idea, well, why would people do this? I mean, don't you understand by trying to take away these freedoms? I think you're alluding to say that you're going to screw up your own freedoms too. Don't you understand that if you try to do this to America, you're going to go down with it too? You're not going to be some ruling class or anything like that, and this idea of no classism like in communism or stuff like that. You're going to suffer. Now, one thinks that, well, nobody would do that. No, who would be stupid enough to do that? Evidently, these people have never heard of things like suicide bombers. There are people who are willing to take out other people at the expense of their own life. And I'm not talking about sacrifice here, but I'm not talking about like a soldier who throws himself over a grenade to keep other people from getting killed. I'm talking about a person who is willing to kill himself to kill others. And that's...
some people just want to watch the world burn.
I think I've heard that someplace before, man. I dig where you're coming from. But, that's what we've got. We're in those days, and it's been happening for a long time. It's not new. The history has cycled itself through these things. I'm just saying that we're in a generation, man. There shouldn't be any excuse to go through this anymore, man. If we're so informed and we have all this information at our disposal, what we're doing is we're using these advances that we have to speed ourselves to these things, rather than realizing that, we shouldn't be doing this again.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. There are people. I think when you get down to this idea of individuality, which is coupled to freedom and coupled to private property, you're going to get inequality out of that. My experience has been uniform in this regard, and that is that the people who are in favor of wealth redistribution are people who think that wealth is going to be redistributed to them, and not people who think that their wealth is going to be redistributed to other people. And that, to me, is the essence of it. For those people who are socialists and talk about individualists as being selfish, well, my experience has been that the people who are in favor of taxing the rich, eating the rich, the 1%, raising taxes, universal health, all of it. I have never met a person who was in favor of that who would be losing comfort, resources, pleasure, if it were implemented. In other words, the people that are always talking about this wealth redistribution and this social idea of like this perfect norm are people who expect to get richer doing it. This is essentially how they're wired for success. They're not wired to go out and start a business or forget start a business, just work a business, work a menial business, make a home for yourself and have a family and a life and happiness. No, their strategy for success and comfort is to wield the weapon of politics in order to enrich themselves. Now, this obviously at the very top, Fidel Castro kept his people in poverty for 60 years, and when he died, he had $800 million in his bank account. Bernie Sanders has 3 houses. I'm not talking about the leaders. We all know how hypocritical they are when Al Gore says we got to, basically go back to living in grass huts and he's burning 6 times more electricity than his neighbors. I'm not talking about them. Those people are obviously hypocrites, although the people who follow them don't seem to be able to see it. I'm talking about kind of the rank and file people who are like real big on the socialism thing. They expect that if they can push this through, if they can eliminate individual differences, get rid of individuality, that their situation will improve. And there's nothing noble about that because I'm always trying to make my situation improve, but I don't have to reduce other people's situations in order to do it.
Yes, it's the strange thing of we're going to promote fairness by being unfair to people and justify it. It's, well, this person can afford to be treated unfairly. It's like, wait a minute.
I've always wanted to know what the dollar value for that was, by the way, Zoe. Seriously. And I'm not trying to cut you off. I'm actually trying to spin you up on the topic you're on. When Bernie, I guess it was Bernie in 2016, they all become a blur to me. They're all just old, bitter people. But I think it was Bernie who basically said in the 2016 campaign something like this. He said, if you make more than $414,000 a year, then you will go into the 93% tax bracket. And aside from the fact that I thought, well, if that's the case, then I'll make $413,999 this year. But the thing that's much more interesting to me than that is, why is it that if you make $414,001, you're an evil person who needs to have their stolen wealth taken away from them? But if you make $13,999, you're one of the people who are morally capable and, in fact, deserving of taking that from somebody else.
Yeah, I don't know what it is about Democrats and their ideas of money, time, and space. It's like, like an abortion. On this side of this 4 inches, you're not a viable human being, but on this side of the 4 inches, you're well, nowadays that's ambiguous now, considering where that's gone. But it's the same thing. Yeah. Well, I remember when Obama was running the first time, and they would talk about the income bracket, and then somehow the wealthy were at, if you net $250,000, this is going to put you in this tax bracket. And then it went from 250 to 200, and then it went from 200 to 150, and it just,
yeah, it's funny how that works.
Remember, right? It just kept going down, and it's sad, man, when you got people who are afraid to make more money than they're making, because if they make like $1 more, here comes, the tax man. So,
right.
And that's, this place where they want to keep us. So to answer the question of like, well, what's this arbitrary number? Well, there isn't. Like people would say that, this taxation that we have, on income taxes, man, that's a conflict with our Constitution. We're not supposed to be taxing income. That's a violation of our right to property. But, we have the 16th Amendment, which is totally antithetical to the Constitution. And when it comes to this tax model that they want to make, and well, what's this percentage that you guys want that's going to satisfy you? Well, nobody can agree to what it is. Well, that's because it's supposed to be zero. Since nobody can agree, well, why don't we just keep it just like that and not tax people on their property, have these perpetual taxes that are totally against the Constitution, because you are robbing people of their individuality. You are robbing them of their incentive. You're taking
you're robbing them of their life.
Yes.
They have put their life into effort in order to gain a financial reward. It's not something that just drops out of the sky. I have invested my life doing this. And sometimes, most of the time, nobody wants to get up in the morning and nobody wants to get on the bus. Nobody wants to drive to work. A lot of people want to go home, but they stay there and they invest part of their lives, which is irreplaceable, in exchange for a reward. So when somebody takes that reward away, they have taken away that person's hours, months, weeks, years of living.
It's slavery.
They've taken it away. Yes, exactly.
It's slavery.
So that's exactly right. So let me give you one last question on individuality, and this is directed to progressives, so it's not that you can answer it because it's an unanswerable question, but here's just the thing I want to wrap up with. If you listen to the progressives, again, I keep making the same mistake. If you listen to the collectivists, especially today, the collectivists will tell you that the individualists who do well are morally evil. It's because they believe that there's only a limited amount of money in the world, and if somebody has more, it means somebody has less. But they believe that the people who do well are morally evil, and then they further believe that anybody who believes in a system that allows somebody to have more must also be morally evil. But here's my question for you. Let's say you're one of these fire-breathing social justice warriors, and you're out to get the 1% that owns let's just say, for the sake of it, I'm exaggerating enormously, let's just say that 1% owns 99% of all the wealth in the world, and that makes them evil. So here's my question. Okay, we're going to be good radicals, we're going to be good collectivists, we're going to take the 1% of the richest people in the world and we're going to kill them. And we're going to distribute that money evenly among the rest of the population. Now, is our problem solved? Because if you kill the richest 1% of the human population, you've killed you've killed 1% of the population. But now that you've got 99% of the total number of people that used to be there, you still have, of what's left, there's still 1% of those people that are now the richest people in the world. They used to be 2%, now they're the 1%, right? So do those people automatically become evil too? Or, since they weren't one of the original 1% who we've liquidated, are they okay now that they've got more money than everybody else? Because I kind of think that if you follow this 1% thing to its logical conclusion, let's kill the top 1% and take their money. Great. Well, now what about what's left? Well, no, everything's fine. That guy's, we killed the billionaires, 100 millionaires, they're fine. No. Now you're going to take the next 1%. You're going to take the next 1%. You're going to keep snipping this until there's nobody left. And it's all about this individual desire to improve yourself by taking stuff away from other individuals. And there's no end to this. And the only thing that happens when you go down this road is that everybody gets poorer, everybody gets more unhappy, everybody gets more miserable, and everybody's lives are lessened.
Indeed, man. The words that you use here to zero in on are this logical conclusion. For them, there is no logical conclusion to it. It's an imaginary conclusion. This justice that they're seeking, that's
right. They never think it out.
Right.
They don't even think past the first stage of it.
Yes. And this isn't a frivolous statement to make. Bill, we're talking about people who are driven with the fuel of emotion, but driven by their imagination. Their imagination is constantly stoked with these things, who to be angry at, and who's doing them dirty, and all that sort of stuff. And that this justice that they think they're going to get, like say if they take out this top 1%er, they're not going to be fulfilled in that, but they think that they will be. And the record is continually showing is that, yeah, every time we make these steps, we shall persevere, and we've overcome this, we've overcome that. It seems like the next generation that comes after feels like they're in a deeper state of oppression. So this stuff is just constantly being, the imagination on this is being constantly stoked. And I would like to think that, yeah, there's they could see the logical conclusion in this, but no, there's some other groundwork that has to be made there.
Do you know, again, I'm using an extreme example, but it's also a historically accurate example. For the people who are calling for the execution and confiscation of people who have more than them, do you know where this process stops?
Man, it sounds like the kind of stuff where, where they have like these piles of bones and...
No, it stops when the person calling for the executions has killed everybody richer than them, and now they're the 1%. Mm-hmm. That's when it stops.
Yes. As we've discussed before, man, these are the people who talk about... eating the rich. It's like, no, man, y'all ain't gonna eat the rich. You will be eating yourselves before you eat anybody else. Yeah. Exactly
right. We can kill everybody richer than you and take all their stuff and keep redistributing it. And if we continue to do this, sooner or later, you will be in the top 1%. And all of a sudden, this idea of killing you and taking your stuff to give to people who are poorer than you, not going to seem like such a good idea. I'm kind of in favor of individualism over collectivism because it makes people happy and reduces the mass murder count. Those are pretty good selling points as far as I'm concerned. For Zoe, Rachel, my good friend, and for all of us here at BillWhittle.com, thanks again for the members for making this show possible. And we'll see you next week right here on The Virtue Signal.